They laughed behind glass walls and whispered in elevators, but none of them knew that the night they called my CEO too old for love would be the night everything in our lives would change forever. They said my CEO was too old for love, and maybe, at first glance, I understood why. His hair was silver, his steps careful, his voice calm in a world that thrived on noise. I was young, ambitious, invisible in a company that worshipped speed and youth. From my desk, I watched him every day, how he listened more than he spoke, how he remembered names others forgot, how his eyes softened when he spoke about dreams instead of numbers. The rumors started quietly, like dust settling. Why does he trust her so much? Why is she always in his meetings? He should be thinking about retirement, not feelings. I pretended not to hear, but every word carved itself into my chest. What they didn't know was that he had saved my job when I made a mistake that could have ended my career, and he never once used it to control me. He simply said, "Everyone deserves a second chance." That was the day I stopped seeing him as just a CEO. As weeks passed, the pressure grew. Board members questioned his decisions. Younger executives tried to sideline him. I saw the exhaustion he hid behind professionalism. One evening, I found him alone in the office, lights dim, city glowing outside. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of judgment had finally bent his shoulders. He said quietly that he was tired of proving his worth in a world that only valued what was new. In that moment, I realized love isn't loud or dramatic. It's choosing to stand when everyone else sits back. The whispers turned cruel. They said I was using him. They said he was embarrassing himself. And then came the meeting, the one where they planned to push him out gracefully, with smiles and fake respect. My heart pounded as I listened. I knew staying silent would be safe. Speaking up would cost me everything. But some lines, once crossed, change who you are forever. When I stood up, the room froze. I told them the truth about his leadership, his integrity, and the countless lives he had lifted quietly. My voice shook, but my resolve didn't. That was the moment I did what no one else dared. Use this as the opening line after the break. When I spoke up for him, I thought I would lose my job, but I never imagined I was about to gain a love that would silence the world. The fallout was immediate. Emails stopped coming. Conversations ended when I walked in. I was removed from projects I had built from nothing. He called me into his office the next morning, and for the first time he looked afraid. Not for himself, but for me. He told me I didn't owe him anything, that he never wanted to be the reason my future was damaged. That was when I finally said what had lived in my heart for so long, that my loyalty wasn't obligation, it was choice. The room felt heavy, charged with words we were both scared to name. Days later, the board meeting happened. Numbers were presented. Results were undeniable. The company had grown stronger under his leadership, not weaker. The same people who mocked his age now praised his experience. Hypocrisy tasted bitter, but justice still felt sweet. What they didn't expect was his decision. He didn't cling to power. He announced a mentorship transition, staying on not as a figure to be pushed out, but as a guide. And then, in a quiet moment away from eyes and rumors, he asked me a simple question. Not about work, not about consequences, but about happiness. Love didn't arrive like a scandal. It arrived like peace. Slowly, honestly. When our relationship became known, some still judged, but their voices felt smaller. I had learned something powerful. People will always talk, but they don't have to live your life. He taught me that age is not the end of love. Fear is. And I taught him that being brave doesn't always mean fighting. It sometimes means allowing yourself to be seen. That in the end, the same office that once echoed with whispers now told a different story. Of respect earned, of courage rewarded, of love that refused to be defined by numbers or years. If there's one truth this journey left behind, it's this: when the world tells you something is impossible, that may be the exact moment you should try. Because sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most beautiful endings. Thought defending him would cost me everything, but it ended up giving us both a new beginning. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. Rumors spread faster than facts. People called our connection inappropriate, impossible, embarrassing. But numbers don't lie. Under pressure, the company's growth told the story they tried to ignore. The board reversed their decision not out of kindness, but because truth demanded it. And then he surprised everyone, including me. Instead of clinging to power, he chose dignity. He announced a transition plan that protected the company and honored his legacy. Away from the noise, he finally allowed himself to be honest about his feelings, not as a CEO, but as a man tired of being told he was past his right to love. We didn't rush. We didn't hide either. When our relationship became public, some judged, some understood, and many stayed silent. What mattered was that we were free from fear, from shame, from other people's timelines. In the end, the same people who doubted him learned a lesson they couldn't ignore. Love doesn't expire, courage doesn't age, and the bravest thing you can do is live your truth. If this story proves anything, it's that when the world tells you it's too late, that might be the exact moment you should begin. Just when we thought the storm had passed, the world tested our love one final time. And this time, walking away would have been easier than staying. Peace never arrives loudly. It sneaks in, uncertain and fragile. After everything we faced, I believe the hardest part was over, but real love always asks for one last proof. A media article surfaced, twisting our story into something ugly: power imbalance, ambition, scandal. Overnight, comments flooded in, cruel and careless. Sponsors hesitated. Employees felt uncomfortable again. I watched him read the headlines in silence, the same silence I had seen before, but deeper now. He told me he was ready to step back completely, to disappear if that meant protecting the company and my future. That was the moment I understood how much he loved me. Not by holding on, but by being willing to let go. And that was the moment I made my final choice. I went public, not with anger, but with honesty. I shared my journey, my mistakes, my growth, and how he never once used his power to control me. I spoke about respect, consent, and the quiet strength of a man the world underestimated. The response wasn't instant, but it was real. Messages came from people who felt seen, from women who found their voice late, from men afraid to love because of age or judgment. The noise slowly softened. Months later, the company stood stronger, not because of profits, but because of truth. He retired on his own terms, not pushed, not shamed, but honored. And I didn't lose my future. I finally stepped into it. We didn't promise forever like a fairy tale. We promised honesty, growth, and courage. Sitting beside him one quiet evening, watching the city glow, I realized something simple and powerful. Love doesn't ask for permission from society. It only asks for bravery. And if there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this: never let the world decide when your heart is done dreaming.